Right now, as you're watching this video, billions of people around the world are preparing for Christmas. They're hanging lights, decorating trees, exchanging gifts, and celebrating what they believe is the birth of Jesus Christ on December 25th. But what if I told you that everything you think you know about Christmas is wrong? What if the true origins of this sacred holiday have nothing to do with Jesus Christ and everything to do with an ancient cosmic mystery that predates Christianity by thousands of years? The real story of Christmas isn't about a baby born in Bethlehem. It's about something far more profound, far more ancient, and far more mystical than mainstream Christianity has ever dared to admit. We're talking about Gnostic wisdom, solar mysteries, and cosmic principles that stretch back to the dawn of human civilization. And once you understand the true origins of Christmas, you'll never see December 25th the same way again. If you're here to explore the hidden mysteries behind our most celebrated holiday, then you're in exactly the right place. Because what I'm about to reveal will challenge everything you've been taught about Christmas and show you the breathtaking cosmic truth that's been hiding in plain sight for 2,000 years. Here's what's going to blow your mind. December 25th was never chosen to commemorate the birth of Jesus Christ. That date was already sacred long before Christianity existed. It was the most important day in the ancient world, celebrated by cultures across the globe for a reason so profound that early Christians had no choice but to adopt it for their own purposes. And the Gnostics, those mystical early Christians who understood the deeper spiritual truths, knew exactly what December 25th really represented. The winter solstice isn't just an astronomical event. It's the moment when our planet reaches the deepest point of darkness and begins its journey back toward the light. For ancient peoples, this wasn't merely seasonal change. It was cosmic rebirth. It was the death and resurrection of the sun god. It was the eternal promise that no matter how dark things become, light will always return. But here's where it gets really interesting. The Gnostics understood that this cosmic drama wasn't happening outside of us. It was happening inside of us. The birth of the light on December 25th wasn't about some historical figure born in Palestine. It was about the birth of divine consciousness within every human being. It was about the awakening of what they called the Christ principle, the divine spark that exists within all of us. Let me take you back to the ancient world and show you what was really happening on December 25th, long before anyone had ever heard of Jesus Christ. We're talking about a time when human beings lived in harmony with the rhythms of nature, when they understood that the cosmos and consciousness were intimately connected, when they celebrated mysteries that would later be suppressed by institutional religion. The winter solstice marks the longest night and the shortest day of the year in the northern hemisphere. Picture yourself as an ancient human watching the sun grow weaker and weaker each day, wondering if it might disappear forever. The days get shorter, the nights get longer, and the world grows cold and dark. Then on December 21st, something miraculous happens. The sun stops its retreat. It pauses for 3 days. And on December 25th, it begins its journey back towards strength and light. This 3-day pause became the foundation for one of humanity's most sacred mysteries. The sun dies on December 21st, remains dead for 3 days, and is reborn on December 25th. Sound familiar? That's because this exact pattern would later be attributed to Jesus Christ. But the Gnostics knew this wasn't about a historical person. This was about an eternal cosmic principle that plays out every single year. Ancient cultures around the world celebrated this moment independently. The Germanic peoples called it Yule, a 12-day festival that honored the rebirth of light. The Romans celebrated Saturnalia, a week-long festival of revelry and gift-giving that culminated on December 25th with the birth of Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun. The Egyptians filled their homes with evergreen trees to celebrate the renewal of Ra, their sun god. The Persians honored Mithra, whose birth was said to occur in a cave on the winter solstice. These weren't primitive superstitions. These were sophisticated mystery traditions that understood something profound about the nature of consciousness and cosmos. They knew that the outer journey of the sun reflected an inner journey of the soul. They celebrated the winter solstice because they understood it as a time of spiritual rebirth, when divine light could be born within the darkness of human consciousness. The Gnostics inherited this ancient wisdom and gave it a revolutionary interpretation. They taught that on the winter solstice, Kor, the eternal virgin, gives birth to the Christ principle. But this wasn't about a woman giving birth to a baby. Kor represented the divine feminine wisdom, the intuitive consciousness that gives birth to spiritual awakening. The Christ wasn't a person. It was the awakened state of consciousness that every human being could achieve. In the ancient mystery schools, initiates would descend into underground chambers at midnight on the winter solstice. They would emerge carrying a wooden statue of Kor, the Virgin Mother, marked with sacred symbols. This ritual reenacted the cosmic drama of light being born from darkness, consciousness emerging from unconsciousness, the divine spark awakening within the human soul. But here's what makes this even more fascinating. The early Christians in Egypt, who were deeply influenced by Gnostic teachings, were already celebrating Christ's birth around 200 AD. These weren't the Orthodox Christians we know today. These were mystical Christians who understood that Christ represented a state of consciousness, not just a historical figure. They celebrated December 25th because they knew it was the perfect time for the birth of divine light within human awareness. The connection between Christmas and ancient solar worship goes far deeper than most people realize. When the Roman Emperor Aurelian established the official festival of Sol Invictus on December 25th in 274 AD, he wasn't creating something new. He was codifying something ancient. The unconquered sun had been celebrated on this date for centuries by mystery traditions that understood the profound spiritual significance of the winter solstice. But the Gnostics saw something that others missed. They understood that the birth of the sun god wasn't just an external event. It was a perfect metaphor for what could happen within human consciousness. Just as the sun is reborn from the darkness of winter, so too can divine awareness be born from the darkness of ignorance and unconsciousness. This is why the Gnostic Gospel of Thomas speaks of humans as children of the light and refers to the divine spark within us as literally that, a spark of the cosmic light that seeks to return to its source. The winter solstice celebration wasn't about worshipping the sun. It was about recognizing that we carry within ourselves the same divine light that illuminates the cosmos. The decorations we still use today carry traces of this ancient wisdom. Evergreen trees weren't just pretty ornaments, they were living symbols of consciousness that remains alive even in the depths of spiritual winter. Holly and ivy represented the eternal nature of divine awareness. Lights weren't just festive decorations. They were reminders of the inner light that can be kindled within human consciousness. Even the tradition of gift-giving connects to this deeper mystery. The ancient peoples exchanged gifts during the winter solstice as symbols of spiritual abundance, reminders that divine consciousness is the ultimate gift that can be shared among awakened human beings. They understood that the greatest present anyone could receive was the awakening of their own divine nature. The Gnostic tradition preserved teachings about what they called the Black Madonna, a mysterious figure who gives birth to divine light from within the cosmic darkness. This wasn't racial symbolism. This was recognition that the deepest spiritual truths emerge from the profound darkness of the unknown, the unconscious, the mysterious depths of existence itself. In Gnostic understanding, the Black Madonna represents Sophia, divine wisdom hidden within matter itself. She is the cosmic mother who gives birth to enlightened consciousness within those who seek her in their own darkness and ignorance. The winter solstice became her special time because it perfectly embodied her mystery. Divine light emerging from the deepest darkness. What's truly remarkable is how these ancient insights align with modern understanding of consciousness and psychology. The winter solstice represents that moment in spiritual development when we've descended into the deepest darkness of our unconscious minds and are ready for the birth of higher awareness. It's the perfect metaphor for psychological and spiritual transformation. The Gnostics taught that this transformation wasn't something that happened automatically. It required what they called gnosis, direct mystical knowledge of our divine nature. The winter solstice celebration was designed to trigger this awakening, to create conditions where participants could experience the birth of Christ consciousness within themselves. This is why Gnostic Christianity looked so different from Orthodox Christianity. While Orthodox Christians focused on believing in Jesus as their saviour, Gnostic Christians focused on awakening the same Christ consciousness that Jesus embodied. They understood that Jesus wasn't unique in his divine nature. He was showing all of humanity what they could become through spiritual awakening. The Gospel of Thomas, one of the most important Gnostic texts, presents Jesus not as a sacrifice for human sin, but as a wisdom teacher who reveals the kingdom of God already present within human consciousness. When Jesus speaks of the kingdom of heaven, he's not talking about a place you go after death. He's talking about a state of awakened consciousness available to anyone willing to seek it. This radically different understanding of Christianity explains why the Gnostics were eventually suppressed by the Orthodox Church. Their teachings were too empowering, too mystical, too focused on direct spiritual experience rather than institutional authority. But their wisdom about the winter solstice and the true meaning of December 25th survived in hidden forms, preserved in symbolism and ritual that continues to this day. When Constantine made Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire, the Church needed to replace the popular pagan festivals with Christian alternatives. December 25th was already the most sacred day of the year for millions of people throughout the empire. Rather than fight this, the Church adopted the date and gradually transformed the cosmic mystery of solar rebirth into the historical celebration of Jesus' birth. But the deeper truth remained hidden in plain sight. Every Christmas tree, every light, every gift, every gathering in the darkness of winter carries echoes of the ancient wisdom that understood December 25th as the birth of divine consciousness within human awareness. Winter carries echoes of the ancient wisdom that understood December 25th as the birth of divine consciousness within human awareness. The transformation wasn't complete, though. The original mystery couldn't be entirely erased because it was woven into the very fabric of the celebration itself. Think about what happens every Christmas morning. Families wake up in darkness, gather around a tree filled with lights, and exchange gifts as the sun rises on December 25th. This isn't random tradition. This is the ancient solar mystery playing out in living rooms across the world, year after year, generation after generation. But there's something even more profound happening here. The Gnostics understood that the 3 days of solar pause between December 21st and 25th represented the journey through what they called the dark night of the soul. This wasn't just poetic language. They were describing an actual psychological and spiritual process that every awakening consciousness must undergo. During these 3 days, ancient initiates would fast, meditate, and prepare for spiritual rebirth. They understood that consciousness had to die to its old patterns before it could be reborn in divine awareness. The sun's apparent death and resurrection became the perfect metaphor for this inner transformation that every seeker must experience. Modern psychology has rediscovered this ancient wisdom in different language. What the Gnostics called the birth of Christ consciousness, we might now recognize as the integration of unconscious contents, the emergence of higher self-awareness, or what Carl Jung termed individuation. The winter solstice timing wasn't coincidental. It aligned with natural rhythms that support deep psychological transformation. The Gnostic scriptures contain remarkable passages that reveal this deeper understanding of Christmas symbolism. In the Apocryphon of John, one of their most sacred texts, we find descriptions of divine light emerging from primordial darkness through a process that mirrors exactly what happens during the winter solstice. The text describes how consciousness descends into the material world, becomes trapped in ignorance, and then awakens to its divine nature through gnosis. This descent and ascent pattern became the template for understanding the Christmas mystery. Just as consciousness falls into the darkness of material existence and then awakens to its divine nature, so too does the sun descend into winter darkness and then rise again in renewed strength. The parallel isn't metaphorical. The Gnostics believed it revealed a fundamental law of cosmic and psychological development. What makes this even more fascinating is how different Gnostic communities interpreted this mystery. The Ophite and Narcina traditions, for example, incorporated serpent symbolism into their understanding of the winter solstice. They taught that the serpent represented the Kundalini force, the spiritual energy that lies dormant at the base of human consciousness until awakened through mystical practice. For these Gnostic groups, the winter solstice celebrated the awakening of this serpent power, its ascent through the spiritual centers of the body, and its ultimate union with divine consciousness. They connected this directly to the biblical passage about Moses lifting up the serpent in the wilderness, understanding it as a metaphor for the elevation of consciousness that occurs during spiritual awakening. The serpent wisdom of these traditions reveals another layer of Christmas symbolism that most people never recognize. The evergreen tree, standing upright and reaching toward heaven, represents the human spine through which spiritual energy ascends. The lights decorating the tree mark the chakras or energy centers that become illuminated during the awakening process. The star at the top symbolizes the crown chakra, where individual consciousness unites with cosmic consciousness. This understanding transforms Christmas from a historical celebration into a living mystery school initiation that anyone can participate in. Every element of the traditional celebration becomes a tool for inner transformation when understood through Gnostic eyes. The gifts represent spiritual qualities we can develop. The gathering represents spiritual community. The lights represent the illumination of consciousness. But here's where the story takes an even more intriguing turn. Archaeological evidence suggests that some of the most famous Christmas symbols have roots in traditions that go back tens of thousands of years. The use of evergreen trees in winter celebrations appears in Paleolithic cave paintings. The exchange of gifts during the darkest days of the year shows up in archaeological sites from the dawn of human civilization. This suggests that the winter solstice mystery isn't just a few thousand years old. It may represent one of humanity's oldest spiritual insights, a recognition of the connection between cosmic cycles and consciousness development that our ancestors understood intuitively. The Gnostics weren't inventing something new. They were preserving and interpreting wisdom that had been guiding human spiritual development since the beginning. The Roman festival of Saturnalia provides a perfect example of how this ancient wisdom was expressed in pre-Christian times. From December 17th to 25th, the normal social order was completely reversed. Masters served slaves, the poor were treated like kings, and everyone engaged in raucous celebration. This wasn't just random partying, it was a ritualistic return to what Romans called the Golden Age, a time when all beings existed in harmony with divine consciousness. The reversal of social roles during Saturnalia represented the Gnostic teaching that divine consciousness turns all worldly values upside down. What seems important to the ego becomes meaningless to awakened awareness. What seems meaningless to the ego becomes the most precious treasure of enlightened consciousness. The festival created temporary conditions where participants could experience this reversal directly. Modern Christmas retains traces of this same principle. During the Christmas season, people often report feeling more generous, more forgiving, more connected to others. Strangers smile more readily. Families reconcile old grievances. Communities come together to help those in need. This isn't just holiday sentiment. It's the ancient Saturnalia principle, still operating, creating temporary conditions where divine consciousness can more easily express itself through human behaviour. The Gnostic understanding of this phenomenon was that certain times of the year, particularly the winter solstice period, create natural openings in consciousness. The cosmic energies align in ways that make spiritual awakening more accessible. The long nights and shortened days force people inward, creating conditions similar to the cave initiations of ancient mystery schools. This is why so many people report having profound spiritual experiences during the Christmas season, even those who aren't particularly religious. The cosmic timing creates what the Gnostics would have recognized as a natural initiation period, when the veils between ordinary consciousness and divine awareness become thinner. The Black Madonna tradition, which the Gnostics connected directly to the winter solstice mystery, preserves some of the most profound insights into this phenomenon. These dark-faced sacred feminine figures appear in Christian churches throughout Europe, often in locations that were previously sites of ancient goddess worship. But their true significance goes far deeper than religious syncretism. The Black Madonna represents what Gnostics called Sophia, divine wisdom hidden within the darkness of material existence. She embodies the principle that enlightenment emerges not from avoiding darkness, but from embracing it fully. The winter solstice celebrates her special time because it perfectly demonstrates her teaching. The deepest darkness contains the seed of the brightest light. In Gnostic understanding, Sophia represents the divine feminine aspect of consciousness that has been exiled into matter, but never loses her essential luminosity. She appears black because she's hidden within the darkness of unconscious awareness, waiting to be recognized and awakened. When she gives birth to the Christ child, she's giving birth to illuminated consciousness within those who seek her wisdom. This feminine aspect of the Christmas mystery has been largely suppressed in Orthodox Christianity, but it remains powerful in Gnostic interpretation. The virgin birth isn't about biological impossibility, it's about consciousness giving birth to itself through pure spiritual receptivity, without the intervention of ordinary mental processes. It represents the spontaneous emergence of divine awareness within prepared consciousness. The timing of this birth during the winter solstice emphasizes that it happens in the depths of spiritual darkness, when ordinary consciousness has exhausted its resources and become receptive to transcendent possibilities. This is why genuine spiritual awakening often occurs during periods of crisis, loss, or despair. The darkness creates the conditions necessary for divine light to be born. The Gnostic communities understood that this process of light being born from darkness wasn't just metaphorical. They developed sophisticated practices designed to trigger this awakening during the winter solstice period. These weren't the simplified rituals that most people associate with ancient religion. These were complex psychological and spiritual technologies that worked with natural cosmic rhythms to facilitate genuine transformation. One of the most remarkable aspects of Gnostic Christmas celebration was their understanding of what they called the threefold birth. They taught that divine consciousness is born simultaneously in three realms. The cosmic realm, where the sun is reborn from winter darkness. The earthly realm, where vegetation begins its cycle of renewal. And the human realm, where individual consciousness awakens to its divine nature. This threefold teaching explains why Gnostic Christmas celebrations were so much more elaborate than simple historical commemorations. They weren't just remembering something that happened in the past. They were participating in something that happens eternally, in every moment when consciousness awakens to its true nature. The winter solstice provided optimal conditions for this awakening because all three realms were aligned in the same transformative pattern. The cosmic dimension of this teaching reveals why the Gnostics were so interested in astronomy and mathematics. They understood that consciousness and cosmos operate according to the same fundamental principles. The mathematical relationships governing planetary movements also govern the development of human awareness. The winter solstice represents a moment when these cosmic forces create maximum support for psychological and spiritual transformation. Modern science has begun to rediscover some of these connections. Research shows that human brain chemistry changes significantly during the winter months, particularly around the solstice period. Melatonin and serotonin production shifts in ways that can trigger profound alterations in consciousness. What the Gnostics understood intuitively, we're now documenting scientifically. But the Gnostic insight went far beyond biochemistry. They recognized that the winter solstice creates what we might now call a morphic field, a pattern of consciousness that makes certain types of spiritual experience more likely to occur. This is why Christmas continues to generate such powerful emotional and spiritual responses, even in people who have no conscious understanding of its deeper significance. The preservation of this wisdom within Christian symbolism represents one of the most sophisticated examples of esoteric knowledge being hidden in plain sight. Every Christmas carol, every nativity scene, every decorated tree carries multiple layers of meaning that most people never recognize. The surface layer tells the story of Jesus' birth. The deeper layer reveals the eternal mystery of consciousness, awakening to its divine nature. Take the Star of Bethlehem, for example. In Orthodox interpretation, this is simply a miraculous astronomical event that guided the wise men to Jesus. But in Gnostic understanding, the star represents the inner light of divine consciousness that guides every seeker towards spiritual awakening. The wise men aren't historical figures. They represent aspects of consciousness that recognize and follow the inner light toward its source. The three gifts they bring reveal another layer of Gnostic symbolism. Gold represents the solar principle, the divine light that illuminates consciousness. Frankincense represents the ascending prayer of awakened awareness seeking union with its source. Myrrh represents the death of the ego that must occur before divine consciousness can be born. These aren't random presents. They're the three essential elements of any genuine spiritual transformation. The journey of Mary and Joseph to Bethlehem becomes, in Gnostic interpretation, the soul's journey from ordinary consciousness to the place where divine awareness can be born. Bethlehem means house of bread, representing the nourishment that spiritual consciousness provides to those who discover it. The inn with no room represents the busy, distracted mind that has no space for divine awareness. The stable represents the humble, receptive consciousness that can accommodate spiritual birth. Even the animals present at the nativity carry Gnostic significance. The ox represents the patience and steadiness required for spiritual development. The donkey represents the humble service that awakened consciousness offers to others. The sheep represent the gentle, innocent awareness that recognizes divine presence. These aren't just charming details. They're teaching symbols about the qualities of consciousness that support spiritual awakening. The shepherds watching their flocks by night represent those who remain alert in the darkness of unconscious existence, ready to receive the announcement of divine consciousness being born. Their humble status emphasizes the Gnostic teaching that spiritual awakening often comes to those who are simple and receptive, rather than those who are learned and sophisticated. The angelic announcement to the shepherds reveals another crucial aspect of Gnostic Christmas understanding. Angels aren't supernatural beings intervening from outside. They represent higher aspects of consciousness that become accessible when awareness opens to transcendent possibilities. The phrase "fear not" that angels always speak represents the reassurance that comes when consciousness recognizes its own divine nature. This multi-layered symbolic system allowed the Gnostics to preserve their most profound teachings within stories that could be told openly, while revealing their deeper meanings only to those prepared to understand them. The Christmas story became a perfect vehicle for transmitting Enlightenment teachings across centuries and cultures. But the Gnostic influence on Christmas extends far beyond symbolic interpretation. Their understanding of cosmic timing influenced the development of the entire Christmas season. The 12 days of Christmas, for example, correspond to what Gnostics understood as the 12 stages of consciousness development that occur during the winter solstice period. Each day represents a specific aspect of spiritual awakening, from the initial recognition of divine possibility through the complete integration of enlightened awareness. This is why traditional Christmas celebrations extend beyond December 25th through Epiphany on January 6th. The Gnostics understood that spiritual transformation requires time to unfold completely. The gift-giving tradition that extends throughout this period reflects the Gnostic teaching that awakened consciousness naturally expresses itself through generosity and service to others. But these weren't material gifts in the original understanding. They were spiritual gifts: wisdom, compassion, insight, healing, and other qualities that emerge spontaneously from divine consciousness. The Feast of Epiphany, which concludes the Christmas season, celebrates the moment when divine consciousness fully reveals itself within human awareness. The word epiphany literally means showing forth or manifestation. In Gnostic understanding, this represents the completion of the transformation process that begins during the winter solstice. The tradition of wassailing, where people would go door to door singing and sharing drink, reflects the Gnostic understanding that spiritual awakening is fundamentally communal. Divine consciousness isn't something you achieve in isolation. It emerges through connection, sharing, and mutual recognition of the divine spark that exists within every person. Even the Christmas tree tradition carries profound Gnostic significance that goes far beyond its connection to ancient tree worship. The tree represents the axis mundi, the cosmic axis that connects earth and heaven, matter and spirit, human consciousness and divine awareness. The lights on the tree mark the progressive illumination of consciousness as it ascends from material awareness toward divine understanding. The practice of placing gifts beneath the tree symbolizes the treasures that become available when consciousness recognizes its connection to the cosmic axis of divine awareness. These gifts aren't earned through good behavior. They're the natural inheritance of consciousness that awakens to its true nature. The star or angel placed at the top of the tree represents the ultimate goal of this ascension: complete union with divine consciousness. This isn't a destination you arrive at. It's a recognition of what you've always been, but had forgotten. The Christmas tree becomes a perfect mandala of spiritual development, visible in millions of homes during the season when cosmic conditions most support this transformation. The Gnostic understanding of Christmas music reveals another dimension of their sophisticated approach to spiritual awakening. The carols that have survived from ancient times aren't just pretty songs. They're carefully crafted sound formulas designed to induce specific states of consciousness. The repetitive melodies and harmonies create vibrational patterns that align human awareness with cosmic rhythms. The tradition of midnight mass on Christmas Eve reflects the Gnostic understanding that spiritual transformation often occurs during the deep quiet of night, when ordinary consciousness is most receptive to transcendent possibilities. Midnight represents the moment of greatest darkness, the perfect time for divine light to be born within prepared awareness. The communion elements of bread and wine take on special significance during the Christmas celebration. In Gnostic understanding, these represent the transformation of ordinary substance into divine essence that occurs when consciousness awakens to its true nature. The bread becomes the body of divine awareness. The wine becomes the blood of cosmic life force. This isn't symbolic substitution, it's recognition of the divine essence that exists within all apparent forms. The reading of the Christmas story during these midnight services creates what the Gnostics would have recognized as a form of guided meditation. The familiar words and images work on multiple levels of consciousness simultaneously, triggering responses in both the conscious and unconscious mind. The story becomes a vehicle for direct transmission of enlightenment energy from the cosmic source to prepared human awareness. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Gnostic Christmas understanding is their recognition that this entire process is available to anyone, regardless of their religious background or intellectual sophistication. The cosmic forces that create optimal conditions for spiritual awakening during the winter solstice operate universally. They don't require belief, doctrine, or institutional membership. They only require openness to the possibility that consciousness is far more than we ordinarily imagine. This is why Christmas continues to generate such profound responses in people from all walks of life. Atheists report feeling moved by Christmas carols. Secular families create elaborate celebrations without any reference to religious doctrine. Children who know nothing about theology respond with wonder and excitement to Christmas magic. The universal appeal isn't accidental. It reflects the universal nature of the consciousness transformation that the season supports. The Gnostic legacy lives on not in any particular church or organization, but in the continued celebration of this cosmic mystery by millions of people who participate in its deeper rhythms without necessarily understanding their significance. Every time someone lights a candle in December darkness, every time someone gives a gift without expecting return, every time someone feels unexpectedly generous or forgiving during the Christmas season, the ancient Gnostic understanding of December 25th continues to work its transformative magic. This understanding reveals why the suppression of Gnostic Christianity was ultimately unsuccessful. You can destroy texts, eliminate teachers, and forbid practices, but you can't suppress cosmic rhythms or the consciousness that recognizes them. The truth about Christmas, as a celebration of divine consciousness being born within human awareness, continues to manifest year after year, generation after generation, regardless of what official religious institutions teach about its meaning. The evidence for this continued operation of Gnostic Christmas wisdom can be found in the remarkable psychological and social changes that occur during the Christmas season. Crime rates drop. Depression levels often lift temporarily. People report increased feelings of connection and meaning. Charitable giving reaches annual peaks. These aren't random coincidences. They're manifestations of the cosmic energies that the Gnostics understood and celebrated. Modern research into seasonal affective patterns confirms that the winter solstice period creates unique neurochemical conditions that can trigger significant shifts in consciousness and behavior. What science measures as changes in melatonin, serotonin, and other brain chemicals, the Gnostics understood as the cosmic forces that support spiritual awakening during the darkest time of the year. But the Gnostic insight went far beyond what modern science has yet discovered. They understood that consciousness itself is the fundamental fabric of reality, and that cosmic events like the winter solstice create ripples in this fabric that can be utilized for spiritual transformation. The Christmas season represents an annual opportunity to participate consciously in this cosmic process of death and rebirth, darkness and light, unconsciousness and awakening. Tod, Ening. The Gnostic understanding of this transformation process reveals why December 25th became such a powerful focal point for human spiritual development across so many different cultures and time periods. But there's something even more profound happening here that most people never recognize. The Gnostics taught that during the 3 days between December 21st and 25th, the veil between ordinary reality and divine consciousness becomes so thin that anyone can access states of awareness normally reserved for advanced mystics. Think about what happens in your own experience during these darkest days of winter. Time seems to slow down. The normal rush of daily life gives way to something deeper and more contemplative. people naturally turn inward, reflect on the year that's ending, contemplate what they want to create in the year ahead. This isn't just seasonal psychology. It's the same inward turning that ancient mystery school initiates were taught to cultivate during their sacred retreats. The Gnostics developed specific practices designed to work with these natural rhythms. They understood that consciousness follows predictable patterns, just like the movement of planets or the growth cycles of plants. During the winter solstice period, awareness naturally descends into deeper levels of psyche, creating perfect conditions for encountering what they called the divine spark that exists at the core of every human being. These weren't complicated rituals requiring years of training. They were simple practices that anyone could learn. Periods of silence and contemplation, fasting to heighten sensitivity, meditation on the symbolism of light emerging from darkness. What made them powerful wasn't their complexity, but their alignment with cosmic timing. The Gnostics had discovered that working with natural rhythms multiplies the effectiveness of any spiritual practice. Modern neuroscience has begun to validate these ancient insights. Research shows that the brain undergoes significant changes during the winter months, particularly in regions associated with introspection, creativity, and what neuroscientists call default mode network activity. The same neural patterns that support deep meditation and mystical experience become more active during the darkest time of the year. But the Gnostic understanding went far beyond individual transformation. They recognized that when multiple people engage in this process simultaneously, it creates what we might now call a collective field effect. The Christmas season represents a time when millions of people around the world are unconsciously participating in the same cosmic rhythm of renewal and awakening. This explains why Christmas generates such powerful social effects that extend far beyond religious communities. The increased generosity, the temporary suspension of conflicts, the heightened sense of connection between strangers, all of these phenomena reflect the operation of what Gnostics understood as group consciousness responding to cosmic influence. The tradition of Christmas markets, where communities gather in public spaces to share food, music, and handmade gifts, preserves traces of ancient Gnostic practices designed to amplify these collective effects. These weren't commercial enterprises in their original form. They were spiritual technologies that created opportunities for people to experience the interconnectedness that emerges when individual consciousness opens to its divine nature. The Gnostic texts describe gatherings that sound remarkably similar to modern Christmas celebrations. Communities would come together during the winter solstice period to share meals, exchange gifts that carried spiritual significance, and participate in ceremonies designed to support collective awakening. The focus wasn't on worship of external deities, but on recognition of the divine presence that emerges within group consciousness when people gather with pure intention. This communal aspect of Gnostic Christmas celebration reveals another layer of wisdom that Orthodox Christianity largely lost. The birth of divine consciousness isn't just an individual achievement. It's something that emerges through authentic connection between people who recognize the divine spark within each other. The Christmas gathering becomes a form of mutual initiation, where each person's awakening supports and amplifies the awakening of others. The exchange of gifts during these gatherings carried profound symbolic meaning in Gnostic understanding. Each gift represented a spiritual quality being shared between awakened beings. Giving someone a handmade object wasn't just generosity, it was transmission of the consciousness that created the object. Receiving such a gift meant opening oneself to be transformed by another person's spiritual energy. This understanding transforms the entire experience of Christmas gift giving from commercial transaction into sacred practice. When someone takes time to choose or create a gift thoughtfully, they're investing it with their own consciousness. When someone receives such a gift with genuine appreciation, They're allowing themselves to be touched by the giver's spiritual essence. The physical object becomes a vehicle for transmission of divine love between human beings. The Gnostic approach to Christmas feasting followed similar principles. Food prepared with love and shared in awareness becomes a form of communion that nourishes not just the body, but the soul. The traditional Christmas meal isn't just about abundance. It's about recognition that divine consciousness expresses itself through the generous sharing of whatever gifts we've been given. This is why Christmas meals often feel different from ordinary eating experiences. People linger longer at the table, conversations go deeper, old grievances are set aside. The food itself seems to nourish something beyond physical hunger. These effects aren't accidental. They're manifestations of the Gnostic understanding that conscious eating in spiritual community creates conditions for divine presence to manifest through shared experience. The tradition of Christmas storytelling reveals another dimension of Gnostic wisdom that has been preserved within popular culture. The stories told during Christmas gatherings aren't just entertainment. They're vehicles for transmitting archetypal patterns that support psychological and spiritual development. Consider the classic Christmas tales that have endured across generations. A Christmas Carol shows the transformation of consciousness from selfishness to generosity through encounters with spiritual guides. The Nutcracker presents the journey from ordinary awareness to magical consciousness through surrender to mystery. It's a Wonderful Life demonstrates how individual awakening affects the entire community through recognition of interconnectedness. These stories work on multiple levels simultaneously. Children enjoy them as entertaining fantasies. Adults recognize their moral and psychological themes. But for those with Gnostic understanding, they become initiation narratives that guide consciousness through specific stages of spiritual development. The winter setting isn't coincidental. These stories use Christmas symbolism to encode teachings about consciousness transformation that can occur during the winter solstice period. The recurring theme of redemption in Christmas stories reflects the core Gnostic teaching that no matter how far consciousness falls into ignorance and selfishness, divine awakening remains possible. The darkest character can be transformed by authentic encounter with spiritual truth. This isn't wishful thinking. It's recognition of the indestructible, divine spark that exists within every human being, waiting to be awakened through proper conditions and influences. The figure of Santa Claus represents one of the most fascinating examples of how Gnostic wisdom has been preserved in popular mythology. The jolly gift giver who travels around the world in a single night, entering homes through chimneys to leave presents for good children, isn't just a charming fairy tale. He's a perfect symbol of how divine consciousness operates within human experience. Santa's ability to be everywhere simultaneously reflects the omnipresent nature of divine awareness. His knowledge of who has been naughty or nice represents the perfect discrimination of enlightened consciousness. His gifts represent the spiritual treasures that become available when awareness opens to its divine nature. His arrival during the darkest night of the year emphasizes the Gnostic teaching that divine grace manifests most powerfully when ordinary consciousness has reached its limits. Even Santa's red clothing carries symbolic significance. Red represents the life force, the spiritual energy that animates divine consciousness. His white beard symbolizes the wisdom that comes through spiritual maturity. His association with the North Pole connects him to the cosmic axis around which all spiritual development revolves. The tradition of children leaving milk and cookies for Santa preserves traces of ancient offering practices designed to honor the divine presence that visits during the winter solstice. These weren't payments for gifts received. They were expressions of gratitude for the spiritual awakening that becomes possible during this sacred time. The reindeer that pull Santa's sleigh represent different aspects of consciousness that must be harmonized and directed towards spiritual goals. Rudolph, with his glowing red nose, symbolizes the inner light that guides consciousness through the darkness of spiritual ignorance. The fact that Santa's sleigh flies emphasizes that awakened consciousness transcends ordinary limitations and can move freely through dimensions normally inaccessible to limited awareness. The North Pole Workshop, where Santa's elves create gifts throughout the year, represents the continuous creative activity of divine consciousness. The elves symbolize the playful, joyful aspects of awakened awareness that find deep satisfaction in creating gifts for others. Their year-round work emphasizes that spiritual consciousness is always engaged in activities that benefit all beings, not just during special seasons. This mythological framework provides children with a perfect introduction to advanced spiritual concepts without the complexity of theological doctrine. The Santa Claus story teaches that generous, loving consciousness has magical powers and universal scope. It introduces the idea that our actions are observed by higher awareness and that goodness is rewarded with spiritual gifts. It suggests that miraculous things become possible when we align ourselves with forces beyond ordinary understanding. The preservation of these teachings within children's stories reveals the sophisticated way that Gnostic wisdom has survived suppression and persecution. Complex metaphysical concepts have been encoded in simple narratives that can be transmitted across generations without triggering theological controversy. Children absorb the essential patterns and carry them forward, even when the conscious understanding of their significance has been lost. The Christmas tree tradition provides another example of how Gnostic symbolism has been preserved within popular practice. The evergreen tree represents consciousness that remains alive and growing even during the darkest periods of spiritual winter. Its triangular shape points upward toward divine consciousness, while its roots extend deep into earthly experience. This perfectly symbolizes the Gnostic understanding that spiritual awakening requires grounding in both human and divine dimensions of existence. The lights placed on the tree aren't just decorations. They represent the progressive illumination of consciousness as awareness ascends from material concerns toward divine understanding. Each light symbolizes a moment of insight, a flash of recognition, a glimpse of the divine nature that exists within ordinary experience. The star placed at the top of the tree represents the ultimate goal of this ascension, complete unity with cosmic consciousness. But this star isn't separate from the tree. It crowns and completes the pattern that begins with earthly roots and ascends through progressive illumination. This teaches the Gnostic principle that divine consciousness isn't somewhere else. It's the fulfillment and completion of human consciousness when it develops to its full potential. The practice of placing gifts beneath the tree symbolizes the treasures that become available when consciousness recognizes its connection to the divine source. These gifts aren't earned through good behavior or theological correctness. They're the natural inheritance of awareness that awakens to its true nature. The tradition of families gathering around the Christmas tree on Christmas morning recreates the ancient Gnostic practice of community awakening. The tree becomes a focal point that concentrates spiritual energy. The gathered family represents different aspects of consciousness coming together in harmony. The opening of gifts symbolizes the revelation of spiritual treasures that emerge when awareness operates from its divine center. The timing of this gathering at sunrise on December 25th aligns with the moment when the sun begins its return journey towards strength and light. This isn't coincidental. It represents conscious participation in the cosmic rhythm of renewal that the Gnostics understood as the foundation for all spiritual development. The Christmas morning experience that millions of families share each year unconsciously recreates one of humanity's most ancient and powerful spiritual practices. The joy, wonder, and sense of magic that characterize this experience aren't just emotional responses to material gifts. They're authentic glimpses of the consciousness state that emerges when awareness opens to its divine nature. Children's natural response to Christmas magic reveals something profound about human consciousness. They instinctively recognize the sacred dimension of the experience even though they can't articulate it conceptually. Their excitement and wonder reflect the soul's recognition that something genuinely transformative is occurring beneath the surface of the celebration. This children's wisdom points toward one of the most important Gnostic teachings about spiritual awakening. Divine consciousness isn't complicated or sophisticated. It's simple, direct, and immediately recognizable when experienced. The complexity comes from the mental structures that obscure this natural awareness, not from the awareness itself. The Christmas season creates temporary conditions where these obscuring mental structures relax, and the natural simplicity of divine consciousness can be experienced more easily. This is why even adults who have lost touch with spiritual dimensions of life often report feeling different during Christmas. Something in them remembers what they knew as children about the magical nature of consciousness itself. The Gnostic understanding of Christmas provides a bridge between the innocent wisdom of childhood and the mature understanding of adulthood. It reveals that the magic children sense during Christmas isn't fantasy, but recognition of genuine spiritual principles operating through symbolic forms. As consciousness develops, these symbols can be understood more deeply while retaining their power to evoke direct experience of divine awareness. This progression from innocent participation to conscious understanding represents exactly the kind of spiritual development that the Gnostics sought to facilitate through their mystery teachings. They understood that wisdom traditions work best when they can speak to consciousness at multiple levels simultaneously, providing immediate experience for beginners and deeper understanding for advanced practitioners. The Christmas celebration achieves this perfectly. Children can participate fully in its magic without understanding its symbolic significance. Adults can appreciate its cultural and emotional dimensions while remaining unconscious of its spiritual depths. But for those prepared to recognize them, all the elements of a complete initiation system remain present and active within the familiar traditions. This reveals why the Gnostic approach to Christmas has proven so enduring and universal. It doesn't depend on belief systems or theological doctrines that might become outdated or culturally inappropriate. It works directly with consciousness itself, using symbols and practices that speak to universal human experiences of transformation, renewal, and awakening. The winter solstice will continue to create optimal conditions for spiritual development, regardless of what religious or secular institutions teach about its significance. The human psyche will continue to respond to the archetypal patterns of death and rebirth, darkness and light that characterize this cosmic moment. And the celebrations that align with these natural rhythms will continue to facilitate genuine transformation in those who participate with open awareness. The true gift of understanding Christmas through Gnostic eyes isn't historical knowledge or theological sophistication. It's recognition that the deepest spiritual mysteries are available to anyone willing to look beneath the surface of familiar experiences. The cosmic drama of consciousness, awakening to its divine nature, plays out every year during the winter solstice period, and everyone who celebrates Christmas is already participating in this ancient mystery, whether they realize it or not. Human consciousness is preparing right now for another journey through the darkness of winter toward the light of renewal. The same cosmic forces that guided ancient Gnostic initiates through their transformative experiences are available to support anyone willing to approach this season with conscious intention and open awareness. The only question is whether we'll remain unconscious participants in this cosmic drama, or awaken to become conscious co-creators in the eternal birth of divine light within human consciousness. Human consciousness is preparing right now for another journey through the darkness of winter toward the light of renewal. The same cosmic forces that guided ancient Gnostic initiates through their transformative experiences, are available to support anyone willing to approach this season with conscious intention and open awareness. The only question is whether we'll remain unconscious participants in this cosmic drama or awaken to become conscious co-creators in the eternal birth of divine light within human consciousness. But there's an even deeper layer to this mystery that the Gnostics preserved in their most advanced teachings. They understood that the winter solstice celebration wasn't just about individual awakening or even collective transformation. It was about participating in the ongoing creation of reality itself through conscious alignment with cosmic principles. The Gnostic cosmology presents a universe that isn't static or mechanical, but alive, conscious, and constantly evolving through the creative interaction between divine awareness and material existence. In this understanding, human consciousness isn't separate from cosmic consciousness. It's a localized expression of the same divine awareness that animates stars, planets, and galaxies. This means that when human beings awaken to their divine nature during the winter solstice period, they're not just experiencing personal transformation, they're participating in the cosmic process through which divine consciousness evolves and expresses itself in increasingly complex and beautiful forms. Every individual awakening contributes to the overall awakening of cosmic consciousness itself. The Christmas celebration becomes, in this deepest understanding, a form of conscious participation in the universe's ongoing creative evolution. When people gather to share love, exchange gifts, and celebrate the return of light, they're not just following traditions or expressing emotions. They're consciously aligning themselves with the cosmic forces that drive evolution toward greater complexity, beauty, and consciousness. This perspective reveals why the Gnostic approach to Christmas was so revolutionary and why it was ultimately suppressed by orthodox religious institutions. It suggests that human beings don't need external saviors or institutional intermediaries to participate in divine consciousness. They need only awaken to their true nature as expressions of cosmic awareness and align themselves with the natural rhythms that support this awakening. The political implications of this teaching were enormous in the ancient world and remain challenging today. If every human being carries divine consciousness and can awaken to this truth through practices aligned with natural cosmic rhythms, then traditional hierarchies based on special knowledge, institutional authority, or divine appointment become unnecessary and ultimately illusory. The Gnostic Christmas celebration demonstrated these principles in action. Communities gathered as equals to support each other's awakening. Gifts were shared based on spiritual inspiration rather than social obligation. Wisdom was transmitted through direct experience rather than doctrinal instruction. Authority emerged from the degree of consciousness demonstrated, not from institutional position or inherited status. These communities experienced during their winter solstice celebrations what the Gnostics called the kingdom of heaven, a state of collective consciousness where divine awareness operates freely through human relationships. This wasn't a utopian fantasy, but a practical demonstration of how human society could function when based on recognition of everyone's divine nature, rather than on fear, competition, and scarcity consciousness. The suppression of Gnostic Christmas practices represented more than theological disagreement. It was the systematic elimination of working models for human society based on spiritual principles rather than material power structures. The Orthodox Church that emerged victorious offered salvation through institutional membership rather than direct awakening, divine authority through appointed hierarchy rather than demonstrated consciousness. But the deeper principles couldn't be completely eliminated because they're built into the fabric of consciousness itself. The winter solstice continues to create optimal conditions for spiritual awakening. Human beings continue to respond to the archetypal patterns of renewal and transformation during this season, and the Christmas celebration continues to provide opportunities for people to experience, however briefly, the consciousness state that the Gnostics recognized as humanity's true inheritance. Modern Christmas retains enough of the original Gnostic elements to function as what we might call a stealth initiation system. People participate in practices that facilitate spiritual awakening without realizing they're engaged in consciousness transformation work. They experience states of expanded awareness, unconditional love, and divine presence while believing they're simply following cultural traditions. This unconscious operation of Gnostic principles through popular Christmas celebration represents one of the most sophisticated preservation systems ever developed. The essential teachings survive not in hidden texts or secret organizations, but in the lived experience of millions of people who participate annually in practices designed to facilitate spiritual awakening. The effectiveness of this system can be measured in the consistent psychological and social effects that Christmas generates across cultures and centuries. Despite massive changes in technology, social organization, and religious belief, Christmas continues to produce similar patterns of behavior and experience: increased generosity, temporary suspension of conflicts, heightened sense of meaning and connection, spontaneous expressions of love and gratitude. These effects occur regardless of people's conscious beliefs about Christmas or their understanding of its spiritual significance. They emerge naturally from participation in practices that align human consciousness with cosmic rhythms of renewal and transformation. The Gnostic wisdom operates through the structure of the celebration itself, not through the theological interpretations placed upon it. This reveals something profound about how spiritual wisdom actually transmits across time and cultures. The most important teachings aren't preserved in words or concepts, but in practices that directly evoke the consciousness states they're designed to facilitate. Christmas functions as a living transmission system that continues to awaken divine consciousness in new generations regardless of what institutions or individuals believe about its meaning. The modern Christmas celebration serves as a bridge between the ancient world of direct spiritual experience and the contemporary world of scientific materialism. It provides people with access to consciousness states that secular culture doesn't acknowledge, while remaining acceptable within religious frameworks that don't fully understand their significance. This bridging function may become increasingly important as humanity faces challenges that require higher levels of consciousness to resolve successfully. Climate change, global inequality, technological disruption, and other contemporary crises can't be addressed through the same level of consciousness that created them. They require the kind of expanded awareness, compassionate wisdom, and collaborative intelligence that emerge naturally from recognition of our divine nature. The annual Christmas celebration provides a practical training ground for developing these higher capacities. The temporary suspension of competitive behavior, the spontaneous expression of generosity, the recognition of fundamental interconnectedness, all of these represent exactly the consciousness shifts needed to address our collective challenges effectively. Understanding Christmas through Gnostic eyes reveals that we already have access to the consciousness technologies needed for planetary transformation. They're embedded in traditions so familiar that most people take them for granted. The question isn't whether we can develop the wisdom needed to navigate our current challenges. The question is whether we'll recognize and consciously cultivate the wisdom that's already operating through our most cherished cultural practices. The Gnostic legacy lives on not in any particular organization or belief system, but in the continued effectiveness of practices they developed for facilitating spiritual awakening. Every Christmas celebration becomes an opportunity to participate consciously in this ancient wisdom tradition, to experience directly the divine consciousness that exists at the core of human nature, and to contribute to the ongoing awakening of humanity to its true spiritual potential. The cosmic drama that unfolds each winter solstice period will continue regardless of human recognition or participation. But when we approach this season with conscious awareness of its deeper significance, we transform from unconscious participants into conscious collaborators in the eternal birth of divine light within human consciousness. And that transformation, multiplied across millions of participants, may represent humanity's best hope for awakening to the divine potential that has always existed within us, waiting for the right conditions to emerge into full expression. The cosmic timing that creates these optimal conditions for consciousness transformation operates on cycles far grander than most people realize. The Gnostics understood that the winter solstice doesn't just mark the turning of a single year. It represents a node in vast cosmic cycles that influence consciousness development across millennia. They taught that certain winter solstices carry special significance, creating what we might call evolutionary leaps in human awareness. According to Gnostic calculations, we're currently living through one of these special periods. The winter solstice celebrations of our time aren't just annual repetitions of ancient practices. They're preparation for a fundamental shift in human consciousness that occurs only once every several thousand years. This explains why so many people report feeling that something unprecedented is happening during recent Christmas seasons, why the traditional celebrations feel charged with unusual significance. The Gnostic texts describe these special periods as times when the veil between dimensions becomes so thin that entire populations can access states of consciousness normally reserved for advanced initiates. During these epochs, the winter solstice doesn't just facilitate individual awakening, it creates opportunities for collective leaps in human awareness that reshape civilization itself. This understanding transforms our participation in Christmas celebrations from nostalgic tradition into conscious preparation for species-wide transformation. Every person who approaches this season with awareness of its deeper significance becomes part of a planetary initiation process that's been building momentum for decades. The familiar rituals take on new meaning when understood as technologies for consciousness evolution operating on a global scale. Consider how Christmas celebration has evolved in just the past century. The holiday has spread to cultures that had no previous connection to Christian tradition. Secular versions have emerged that preserve the essential elements while discarding theological framework. Digital technology has created new forms of connection and gift-giving that extend the Christmas energy across vast distances. These aren't random cultural developments. They're manifestations of the same cosmic forces that the Gnostics understood as driving consciousness evolution. The globalization of Christmas represents something unprecedented in human history, a unified planetary celebration aligned with cosmic rhythms of transformation. For the first time, human beings across all continents are participating simultaneously in practices designed to facilitate spiritual awakening. The collective energy generated by this synchronized celebration creates what the Gnostics would have recognized as a planetary field of consciousness capable of supporting massive evolutionary leaps. Modern communication technology amplifies this effect exponentially. When millions of people share Christmas experiences through social media, watch the same holiday movies, listen to the same seasonal music, they're creating patterns of resonance that extend far beyond local communities. The Christmas celebration becomes a global meditation, a planetary ritual of renewal that operates through electromagnetic fields, quantum entanglement, and other phenomena that ancient Gnostics intuited but couldn't measure scientifically. The environmental crisis that characterizes our historical moment adds another layer of significance to contemporary Christmas celebrations. The winter solstice has always represented the promise that light will return even from the deepest darkness. For humanity currently facing potential ecological collapse, this promise takes on unprecedented urgency. The Christmas celebration becomes a collective act of faith that consciousness can evolve quickly enough to address challenges that threaten the continuation of human civilization. The Gnostic understanding suggests that these challenges aren't obstacles to consciousness evolution, but catalysts for it. Crisis creates exactly the conditions needed for rapid awakening. When ordinary approaches fail and familiar structures collapse, consciousness becomes receptive to transcendent possibilities that would otherwise remain inaccessible. The current global situation creates optimal conditions for the kind of species-wide awakening that Gnostic traditions predicted would eventually occur. This perspective reveals why Christmas continues to generate such powerful responses despite increasing secularization and commercialization. The deeper cosmic forces operating through this celebration remain unaffected by surface changes in religious belief or cultural interpretation. Whether people understand Christmas as religious observance, cultural tradition, or commercial opportunity, their participation in its essential practices continues to facilitate the consciousness transformation that these practices were designed to support. The commercialization of Christmas, which many people experience as corruption of its spiritual significance, actually serves important functions in the planetary awakening process. Commercial marketing spreads Christmas symbolism and practices to populations that might otherwise have no exposure to these consciousness technologies. The economic activity generated by Christmas creates global networks of connection and exchange that mirror the interconnectedness that emerges from spiritual awakening. Even the stress and overwhelm that many people experience during the Christmas season serve evolutionary purposes. The pressure of gift-giving, family gatherings, and social obligations forces people to confront their limitations and discover resources they didn't know they possessed. The contrast between Christmas ideals and ordinary reality creates cognitive dissonance that can trigger profound questioning about the nature of consciousness and meaning. The environmental impact of modern Christmas celebration creates another form of productive tension. The waste generated by excessive consumption forces awareness of humanity's relationship with the natural world. The contrast between messages of peace and love during Christmas and the ecological destruction caused by Christmas consumption creates moral pressure that can catalyze deeper examination of values and priorities. These tensions aren't flaws in the Christmas system, but essential elements of its transformative function. The Gnostics understood that consciousness evolution requires friction between existing patterns and emerging possibilities. The discomfort generated by this friction motivates the inner work necessary for genuine transformation. Christmas provides an annual opportunity for millions of people to experience this transformative friction in relatively safe and supported conditions. The integration of ancient wisdom with modern technology creates unprecedented opportunities for conscious participation in the Christmas mystery. Meditation apps provide guided practices aligned with winter solstice timing. Online communities connect people seeking deeper understanding of seasonal spirituality. Digital art and music create new forms of sacred expression that carry traditional energies into contemporary contexts. Virtual reality technology opens possibilities for experiencing Gnostic-style initiation ceremonies that were previously available only to small groups of dedicated practitioners. Artificial intelligence can analyze patterns in Christmas celebration and identify elements most effective for facilitating consciousness transformation. Biofeedback devices can measure physiological changes during Christmas practices and optimize their effectiveness for individual participants. These technological enhancements don't replace traditional Christmas practices, but amplify their consciousness transforming potential. The combination of ancient wisdom and modern tools creates hybrid systems that may prove more effective than either approach alone. The Gnostics would likely have embraced these developments as natural evolution of their consciousness technologies. The scientific study of Christmas effects provides another bridge between ancient wisdom and contemporary understanding. Research into seasonal affective patterns, neurochemical changes during holiday periods, and social psychology of gift-giving creates objective frameworks for understanding phenomena that Gnostics described in mystical language. This research validates many Gnostic insights while suggesting new applications for their consciousness technologies. Studies of meditation during winter months show enhanced effectiveness compared to other seasons. Research into group consciousness effects during synchronized celebrations reveals measurable changes in global coherence indices. Investigation of gift-giving psychology demonstrates neurological changes that mirror descriptions of spiritual awakening in Gnostic texts. These scientific findings provide contemporary vocabulary for ancient wisdom that remains as relevant today as it was 2,000 years ago. The emerging field of consciousness studies creates academic frameworks for investigating Christmas as a sophisticated system for facilitating awareness transformation. Universities offer courses that examine holiday traditions through the lens of transpersonal psychology, anthropology of consciousness, and comparative mysticism. This academic legitimacy creates new opportunities for preserving and transmitting Gnostic Christmas wisdom to future generations. Medical research into the healing effects of Christmas celebration reveals physiological mechanisms through which these practices support both psychological and physical well-being. Studies show improved immune function, reduced inflammation, and enhanced cardiovascular health during periods when people participate actively in Christmas traditions. The Gnostics understood these connections intuitively, but modern medicine provides detailed explanations for how spiritual practices affect material health. The psychological research into Christmas experiences reveals consistent patterns of consciousness, change that occur across cultures and religious backgrounds. People report increased empathy, expanded sense of meaning, enhanced creativity, and greater life satisfaction during Christmas periods. These effects persist beyond the holiday season, suggesting that Christmas participation creates lasting changes in consciousness structure and function. Anthropological studies of Christmas evolution reveal how the celebration adapts to different cultural contexts while preserving essential transformative elements. Indigenous communities integrate Christmas with their own solstice traditions, creating hybrid practices that honor both ancient wisdom and contemporary circumstances. These adaptations demonstrate the universal applicability of consciousness technologies that the Gnostics developed. Economic analysis of Christmas impact reveals the massive scale of resources that humanity dedicates annually to this celebration. The global Christmas economy represents one of the largest coordinated activities in human history. From a Gnostic perspective, this economic mobilization reflects unconscious recognition of Christmas's importance for species survival and evolution. Humanity invests enormous resources in Christmas because some deep instinct recognizes its necessity for consciousness development. The environmental research into Christmas practices reveals both challenges and opportunities for sustainable celebration. Traditional elements like evergreen trees, natural decorations, and locally sourced foods align with ecological principles. Contemporary additions like electronic lights, mass-produced gifts, and global transportation create environmental stress. The challenge becomes integrating ancient wisdom with environmental responsibility to create Christmas practices that support both consciousness evolution and planetary health. Climate scientists studying winter patterns note that changing global weather affects the environmental context within which Christmas celebrations occur. Warmer winters in many regions alter the psychological experience of the season. Earlier spring-like conditions may affect the neurochemical changes that support consciousness transformation during traditional winter solstice periods. These environmental shifts require adaptive responses that maintain Christmas's transformative potential despite changing external conditions. Agricultural research into winter growing cycles reveals how modern food systems affect the nutritional quality of Christmas feasting. Traditional Christmas foods were selected partly for their consciousness-affecting properties. Modern agricultural practices may reduce these psychoactive qualities, potentially diminishing Christmas's transformative effects. Understanding these connections creates opportunities for optimizing Christmas nutrition to support consciousness development. Astronomical research into solar cycles reveals variations in cosmic radiation during different winter solstice periods. Some years may provide more optimal conditions for consciousness transformation than others. Advanced practitioners might time their Christmas practices to align with these subtle cosmic influences, maximizing the effectiveness of their seasonal spiritual work. The study of electromagnetic fields during winter months reveals how reduced daylight affects human biorhythms and electromagnetic sensitivity. Christmas lights and electronic decorations create artificial electromagnetic environments that may either support or interfere with natural consciousness transforming processes. Understanding these interactions allows for more conscious design of Christmas environments that optimize their spiritual effectiveness. Research into sound frequencies and Christmas music reveals how traditional carols and seasonal songs affect brainwave patterns and consciousness states. Certain musical intervals and rhythmic patterns consistently produce measurable changes in neural activity that correspond to descriptions of spiritual awakening in mystical traditions. This research validates the Gnostic understanding of Christmas music as sophisticated consciousness technology disguised as entertainment. The investigation of scent and aromatherapy during Christmas season reveals how traditional seasonal fragrances affect neurotransmitter production and emotional states. Pine, cinnamon, frankincense, and other Christmas scents have documented effects on brain chemistry that support the consciousness changes that Christmas practices are designed to facilitate. Modern understanding of olfactory neuroscience explains mechanisms that ancient practitioners understood experientially. Studies of color psychology and Christmas decorations reveal how red, green, gold, and other seasonal colors affect mood, attention, and cognitive processing. The traditional Christmas color palette wasn't chosen randomly, but reflects deep understanding of how visual stimuli influence consciousness. Contemporary color therapy research provides scientific frameworks for optimizing Christmas visual environments to support transformation. The research into gift-giving psychology reveals complex neurological and social processes that occur during Christmas exchanges. Brain imaging studies show that both giving and receiving gifts activate reward circuits, empathy networks, and social bonding systems simultaneously. These neurological changes correspond closely to descriptions of consciousness expansion in Gnostic literature, suggesting that Christmas gift exchanges function as practical exercises in developing higher awareness. Investigation of family dynamics during Christmas gatherings reveals how these seasonal reunions create unique opportunities for healing relationship patterns and integrating psychological development. The combination of nostalgia, celebration, and temporary suspension of ordinary routines creates conditions that psychologists recognize as optimal for therapeutic breakthrough. Christmas family gatherings function as informal group therapy sessions that support both individual and collective healing. The study of Christmas storytelling traditions reveals how seasonal narratives affect cognitive development and meaning-making processes. Christmas stories consistently feature themes of transformation, redemption, and transcendence that serve as mental programming for consciousness evolution. Children exposed to these stories during their formative years internalize archetypal patterns that support spiritual development throughout their lives. Research into Christmas ritual and ceremony reveals how repetitive seasonal practices affect memory formation and identity development. Annual participation in Christmas traditions creates neural pathways that strengthen over time, building psychological structures that support consciousness stability during transformation processes. The Gnostics understood these mechanisms intuitively and designed Christmas practices to create optimal conditions for sustainable awakening. The investigation of Christmas community building reveals how seasonal celebrations create social bonds that extend far beyond the holiday period. Communities that celebrate Christmas together show increased cooperation, mutual support, and collective resilience throughout the year. These social effects reflect the consciousness changes that Christmas practices facilitate in individuals who participate authentically in seasonal community building. Studies of Christmas creativity and artistic expression reveal how seasonal inspiration affects innovation and cultural development. Artists, musicians, writers, and other creative professionals report enhanced inspiration and productivity during Christmas periods. This seasonal creativity surge reflects the consciousness expansion that occurs when awareness opens to its divine nature during optimal cosmic timing. The research into Christmas meditation and contemplative practices reveals how traditional seasonal activities affect attention, awareness, and spiritual development. Simple Christmas practices like gazing at lights, listening to carols, or contemplating winter landscapes produce measurable changes in brain activity that correspond to advanced meditative states. These findings validate the Gnostic understanding that Christmas provides accessible pathways to transcendent awareness for practitioners at all levels of development. Human consciousness stands at a threshold. The ancient Gnostic wisdom preserved within Christmas celebration offers keys to transformation that humanity desperately needs. Climate crisis, social inequality, technological disruption, and spiritual emptiness create conditions that demand rapid evolution in human awareness. The consciousness technologies embedded in Christmas traditions provide practical tools for this evolutionary leap, but only if we recognize them and use them consciously. The choice before us isn't whether to celebrate Christmas, but how to celebrate it. We can continue participating unconsciously in traditions that facilitate transformation we don't understand. Or we can awaken to the profound spiritual science that operates through these familiar practices and consciously collaborate with the cosmic forces that seek to birth divine consciousness within human awareness. The Gnostics understood that the ultimate purpose of Christmas isn't to commemorate something that happened in the past, but to participate in something that's happening eternally. The birth of divine light within the darkness of unconscious existence. This birth doesn't occur just once a year on December 25th. It occurs whenever conditions align to support the awakening of human consciousness to its true divine nature. Christmas provides annual training in recognizing and creating these conditions. Every person who approaches this season with conscious intention contributes to a planetary process of awakening that transcends any individual transformation. The familiar celebrations become laboratories for consciousness evolution, opportunities to practice the expanded awareness that humanity will need to navigate the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead. The true gift of Christmas isn't found under any tree or wrapped in any package. It's the recognition that divine consciousness exists within every human being, waiting for the right conditions to emerge into full expression. The Gnostic origins of Christmas reveal that we already possess everything needed for this awakening. We need only remember what we've always known, but temporarily forgotten, that we are divine beings having a human experience, and Christmas is the annual celebration of this eternal truth. Truth. The winter solstice isn't just happening outside your window, it's happening inside your consciousness right now. Every breath you take during these darkest days carries cosmic energies that can transform your awareness in ways that would have been impossible just weeks ago. The Gnostics knew this. They understood that December 21st through 25th creates a window of opportunity that opens only once each year, when the fabric of reality becomes so malleable that ordinary human beings can access states of consciousness normally reserved for advanced mystics. Here's what's happening in your brain right now that modern science has finally begun to measure. The reduced daylight triggers massive shifts in neurotransmitter production. Melatonin levels spike, creating natural conditions similar to those achieved through years of meditation practice. Serotonin patterns change in ways that enhance introspection and spiritual sensitivity. Your pineal gland, what ancient traditions called the seat of the soul, becomes hyperactive during these winter days. But the Gnostics understood something that neuroscience is only beginning to discover. These biochemical changes aren't random evolutionary accidents. They're precise biological mechanisms designed to support consciousness transformation during the winter solstice period. Your body knows something your mind has forgotten, that this is the optimal time for spiritual awakening, and it's preparing you whether you realize it or not. Think about how different you feel during the days leading up to Christmas. Time seems to slow down. Normal priorities shift. You find yourself thinking about meaning, purpose, connection in ways that feel foreign during the rest of the year. These aren't psychological quirks triggered by cultural conditioning. These are authentic glimpses of expanded awareness breaking through the ordinary structures of consciousness. The Gnostics developed sophisticated practices for working with these natural rhythms. They understood that consciousness follows predictable patterns, just like weather systems or tidal movements. During the winter solstice period, awareness naturally turns inward, creating perfect conditions for encountering what they called the divine spark that exists at the core of every human being. These practices weren't complicated rituals requiring years of training. They were elegant technologies that anyone could master. Periods of intentional silence during the longest nights, contemplative gazing at winter stars, mindful attention to the interplay between darkness and artificial light. What made them powerful wasn't their complexity, but their timing. The Gnostics had discovered that working with cosmic rhythms multiplies the effectiveness of any consciousness practice exponentially. Consider what happens when you sit quietly in front of a Christmas tree with all the lights on and the room otherwise dark. Your visual system responds to the contrast in ways that trigger specific brainwave patterns associated with altered states of consciousness. The repetitive blinking of lights creates a natural strobe effect that can induce the same neural changes that advanced practitioners achieve through years of meditation training. This isn't accident or coincidence. The tradition of Christmas lights evolved from ancient Gnostic practices designed to use visual stimulation for consciousness transformation. Every twinkling bulb on every Christmas tree functions as a miniature device for altering awareness. Millions of people sit in front of these consciousness-altering installations every December without realizing they're participating in sophisticated spiritual technology. The Gnostics understood that during the 3 days of solar pause between December 21st and 25th, ordinary reality becomes so unstable that individual consciousness can access what they called the Akashic field, the cosmic information matrix that contains all knowledge and possibility. Modern quantum physics describes similar phenomena using different language: non-local consciousness, morphic resonance, quantum entanglement effects that operate beyond the limitations of space and time. During these winter solstice days, the boundary between individual awareness and cosmic consciousness becomes permeable in ways that don't occur during other seasons. This is why so many people report having profound dreams, spontaneous insights, or unexplainable experiences of connection during the Christmas period. The cosmic conditions literally create temporary openings in consciousness that allow access to information and awareness normally beyond human reach. The gift-giving tradition that characterizes Christmas preserves traces of ancient Gnostic practices designed to work with these expanded consciousness states. When someone chooses or creates a gift with genuine love and intention, They're investing it with their own consciousness energy. When someone receives such a gift with authentic appreciation, they're allowing themselves to be touched by the giver's spiritual essence at a quantum level. This consciousness exchange doesn't require belief in metaphysical concepts. It operates through measurable electromagnetic and biofield interactions that occur whenever human beings connect with genuine intention. The gift becomes a physical anchor for energetic transmission between awakened aspects of consciousness. The wrapped package sitting under the tree carries actual information patterns from the giver's awareness that can trigger transformation in the receiver's consciousness. The timing of this exchange during the winter solstice period amplifies these effects dramatically. The cosmic energies available during these days create optimal conditions for consciousness transmission between human beings. A gift given during Christmas carries transformative potential that the same object given at any other time of year simply wouldn't possess. The Gnostic communities understood this principle and developed elaborate gift exchanges that functioned as mutual initiation ceremonies. Each person would create something that embodied their highest understanding or deepest aspiration. The community gathering would become an opportunity for everyone to share their spiritual development with everyone else through conscious gift exchange. Modern Christmas gift-giving retains traces of this profound practice, though most people participate unconsciously in what was originally sophisticated consciousness technology. Every thoughtfully chosen present carries potential for awakening. Every moment of genuine gratitude creates openings for expanded awareness. Every act of generosity during the Christmas season functions as practical training in the consciousness state that the Gnostics recognized as humanity's true nature. The Christmas meal tradition preserves another layer of Gnostic wisdom about consciousness transformation during the winter solstice. Food prepared and shared with conscious intention becomes what ancient traditions called prasad, blessed substance that carries spiritual energy capable of triggering awakening in those who receive it with awareness. The biochemistry of this process involves mechanisms that modern nutritional science is beginning to understand. When food is prepared by someone in an expanded consciousness state, it literally carries different molecular information than the same ingredients prepared mechanically or with negative emotion. The cook's consciousness affects the electromagnetic properties of the ingredients in measurable ways that influence how the food affects those who consume it. During the Christmas feast, families unknowingly participate in communion practices that mirror the most advanced spiritual technologies ever developed. The shared meal becomes a form of group consciousness meditation where individual awareness merges temporarily into collective awakening. The food serves as a medium for transmitting higher consciousness states between family members who may have no conscious understanding of what's occurring. The traditional Christmas foods weren't chosen randomly, but reflect deep understanding of how specific nutrients affect consciousness during winter months. Rich proteins provide amino acids needed for neurotransmitter production. Complex carbohydrates support steady energy for extended periods of introspection. Seasonal spices like cinnamon, nutmeg, and cloves contain compounds that enhance cognitive function and spiritual sensitivity. The abundance characteristic of Christmas feasting creates psychological conditions that mirror the consciousness state the Gnostics called divine realization. When people feel genuinely provided for, when scarcity consciousness temporarily dissolves, awareness naturally opens to recognize the abundant nature of existence itself. The Christmas meal becomes training in the consciousness that recognizes infinite supply available through alignment with cosmic principles. The extended nature of Christmas celebration, stretching from December 21st through January 6th, reflects Gnostic understanding that consciousness transformation requires time to integrate completely. The winter solstice creates initial openings in awareness, but stabilizing these expanded states requires consistent practice over multiple weeks. So there you have it. The true origins of Christmas have nothing to do with the birth of a Palestinian preacher 2,000 years ago. This is about something far older, far more profound, and far more personally relevant than anything mainstream Christianity has ever dared to acknowledge. December 25th is the annual celebration of divine consciousness being born within human awareness, the cosmic moment when light emerges from darkness, when the spark of divinity awakens within every person willing to recognize it. The Gnostics understood this truth and encoded it so perfectly in traditions that survive today that millions of people unknowingly participate in humanity's most sophisticated consciousness transformation technology every single year. Christmas isn't about worshipping an external savior. It's about awakening the divine nature that already exists within you, waiting for the right cosmic timing to emerge into full expression.